Welcome to Night Shift Pulse. Comment your city and the time below. The night connects us all. If you enjoy what you hear, please subscribe. Let's step into the dark. Story 1. The standby paramedic's third chair. I found it during my third lap around the rig. A folding chair, metal frame, canvas seat, positioned exactly 3 feet from our rear bumper. Angled inward like someone had been sitting there watching us work. But we were on standby. There was no work, just Marcus inside the cab checking inventory, and me outside under the floodlights of a closed gas station at the edge of Route 42, waiting for dawn or a dispatch, whichever came first. The chair hadn't been there 20 minutes earlier, I was certain. I'd walked the perimeter twice already, the way I always did on these dead shifts, just to keep my legs from cramping. The station lot was empty except for our rig, a dumpster, and the skeletal remains of a fuel pump island that hadn't worked in years. No other vehicles. No foot traffic. Just wind pushing trash across cracked asphalt and the distant hum of the interstate. I stared at the chair. It was the kind you'd see at a little league game or a backyard cookout. Ordinary, except for the fact that it absolutely should not have been there. "Marcus," I called through the open passenger window. "You see this?" He leaned out, squinting under the harsh sodium lights. "See what?" "The chair." "What chair?" I pointed. He followed my finger, then shrugged. "Don't see anything, Eric. You good?" I walked closer. The chair was solid, real. I could see every rivet in the frame, the slight sag in the canvas where weight had settled over time. Under the floodlights, it cast a clean, sharp shadow stretching toward the rig. "You're telling me you don't see a folding chair right here?" I tapped the frame with my boot. It made a metallic ping. Marcus climbed out, walked over, and stopped exactly where I was standing. He looked down. Looked at me. "Eric, there's nothing there." I felt something cold move through my chest. Not fear, not yet. Just a dislocation, like stepping off a curb that's taller than you expected. I nudged the chair again. Same sound, same shadow. "I'm looking right at it," I said. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then glanced at his watch. "It's almost 3 a.m. You've been awake since yesterday morning. Maybe take a break, yeah?" He went back inside. I stayed where I was, staring at the chair. Then I pulled out my phone and took a picture. The flash lit up the pavement, the rig, the dumpster. When I checked the screen, the chair wasn't there. Just empty asphalt where it should have been. I tried again. Same result. I switched to video, panned slowly across the lot, played it back. No chair, but when I looked up, it was still there, 3 feet from the bumper, facing me. I thought about moving it, dragging it to the dumpster, collapsing it, shoving it out of sight. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the angle, the way it was oriented, not toward the rig or the road, but directly at the spot where I'd been standing when I first noticed it. Like it had been positioned specifically for me. Instead, I went back to the cab and climbed into the passenger seat. Marcus was scrolling through his phone, half asleep. Dispatch was quiet. The MDT screen glowed in the darkness, showing our unit status. Available. Standby location, Route 42. Gas station. No updates, no calls. "You sure you didn't see it?" I asked. "See what?" "The chair." He sighed. "Eric, I'm telling you, there's nothing out there." I didn't push it, but I kept the passenger mirror angled so I could watch the chair without turning around. For the next hour, I didn't take my eyes off it. It didn't move, didn't shift, didn't collapse or blow away. It just sat there, patient and still, like it was waiting for something. At 4:17 a.m., dispatch finally broke the silence. "Unit 12, respond to a private residence possible cardiac event, 16 Summit Terrace." Marcus started the engine. I grabbed the MDT, confirmed the call, and we rolled out. As we pulled onto the highway, I twisted in my seat to look back at the gas station. The chair was still there under the floodlights, framed perfectly in the center of the lot. The call was routine. Elderly man, chest pain, stable vitals, transport to County General. We cleared the scene by 5:42 and dispatch sent us back to the same standby location. Route 42, the closed gas station. When we arrived, the chair was gone. I got out immediately, walked the perimeter twice. Nothing. No drag marks, no sign it had ever been there. Marcus didn't say anything, but I could feel him watching me from the cab. I climbed back in. We sat in silence for another hour. Then just after 7 a.m., as the sky started to lighten, I saw it again. Not at the rear bumper this time, closer, maybe 6 feet from my door. Same chair, same angle, facing me. I didn't tell Marcus, I just stared at it through the side mirror, my pulse ticking up, wondering if I should get out and check again. But before I could move, dispatch called us to another address. When we returned an hour later, the chair was back at the rear bumper. This continued for 3 more shifts. Always the same location, always the midnight hours. The chair would appear sometime after 2 a.m., always positioned relative to where I was standing or sitting, always facing me. It never showed up on camera. Marcus never saw it. But I did. Every time. On my 5th shift at that location, I tried something different. I brought a folding chair of my own, set it up next to the rig, and sat in it. For a while, nothing happened. Then around 2:30 a.m., I felt the weight shift. Not in my chair, in the space beside me. I looked over, the 3rd chair was there, right next to mine, positioned exactly parallel, like someone had carefully measured the distance to make sure we were sitting side by side. I stood up, walked 10 feet away, watched. The 3rd chair adjusted, rotated slightly, still facing me. I got back in the rig. Marcus was asleep. I sat there, gripping the door handle, watching the chair through the mirror. It didn't move again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was studying me, learning my patterns, recording my movements. At 6:53 a.m., I checked the dash cam footage on the MDT. Scrolled back through the entire night. The timestamp showed my chair clearly. Showed me sitting in it. But the 3rd chair never appeared. Just empty space beside me and my head occasionally turning to look at nothing. I filed a maintenance report that morning, claimed there was a technical issue with the dash cam. They replaced the unit within a week. But when I returned to the same standby location, the chair reappeared. Same position, same shadow, same silent observation. I requested a schedule change. Dispatch moved me to daytime shifts for 2 months. I didn't see the chair again. Thought maybe it was over. Fatigue, stress, overwork. I convinced myself it had been nothing. Then last week they put me back on midnights. Different zone, different standby locations, no more Route 42. But 3 nights ago, during a standby at a shopping plaza off exit 19, I found something on the pavement when I got out to stretch. Faint marks. Scratches in the asphalt. 4 small indentations, evenly spaced, like the feet of a folding chair had rested there for a very long time. I looked up. The plaza was empty. No chairs, no furniture. Just our rig and the dark outline of shuttered storefronts. But under the streetlight, about 8 feet ahead of me, I saw a shadow. Long and thin, the shape of a folding chair. Angled toward me, I got back in the rig, told Marcus I wasn't feeling well. He drove us to a different location without asking questions, but when I checked the side mirror as we pulled away, I saw it. Just for a second, the shadow still stretching across the pavement, still facing the spot where I'd been standing. I don't think it's tied to the gas station anymore. I think it's tied to me. And I think it's been sitting beside me just outside my field of vision for longer than I want to admit. Watching every call, every decision, every moment I thought I was alone. Some shadows don't need light to exist. They just need someone to finally notice they've always been there. Story 2. The Urban Response Medic and the Address That Shifted. Dispatch sent us to 14 Ashland Court just after midnight. Difficulty breathing. Possible asthma exacerbation. Caller reported the patient as a 28-year-old male. Standard call. Nothing remarkable. I'd run Ashland before. The street was a narrow corridor between 2 blocks of row houses in the older part of the city. The kind of neighborhood where addresses ran sequentially and parking was a nightmare. I knew the layout. Except when we arrived, 14 Ashland Court wasn't where it should have been. Jamie was driving. She slowed as we entered the block and I scanned the building numbers. 12, 16, no 14. The house that should have been 14 was set back slightly from the street, but the number above the door read 18. I checked the MDT. The address was clear, 14 Ashland Court. "Pull over," I said. "Let me check on foot." She stopped mid-block, hazards on, and I grabbed the jump bag. The street was quiet, no porch lights, no movement. I walked back toward 12, then forward again toward 16, counting the buildings. The numbers didn't add up. 12 was a narrow brick row house with bars on the windows. 16 was identical but slightly wider. Between them was a recessed alley access, unlit and gated. No structure, no entrance, no 14. I keyed the radio. "Dispatch Unit 7, can you confirm the location? We're on scene, but the address doesn't appear to exist." There was a pause. Then, "Unit 7, GPS shows you on Ashland Court. Caller is still on the line. They confirm 14 Ashland Court, second floor apartment." I looked up. Above the alley gate, barely visible in the gap between buildings, I saw a transom window. Dark, but present. And below it, mounted on the brick, a small tarnished plaque, 14. "Found it," I said into the radio. "Access is restricted. We're going to need a key holder or building contact." Caller states the door is unlocked. Second floor, rear apartment. I pushed the gate. It swung open with a low creak, revealing a narrow stairwell wedged between the buildings. The steps were old, brick, slick with moss. I climbed slowly, the jump bag slung over one shoulder, and reached a landing barely wide enough to turn around. A single door. No number, no nameplate, just flaking green paint and a tarnished brass handle. I knocked, no response. Tried the handle. It turned. Inside, the apartment was small and cold, a single room with a kitchenette, a sagging couch, and a narrow bed against the far wall. No lights on, no patient visible. I called out, "Paramedics, anyone here?" Silence. I stepped further inside, checking the corners. The bathroom door was ajar, empty. Closet empty, no one home. But on the table beside the couch, I saw a cell phone. Screen on. Call timer still running. 8 minutes, 42 seconds. I picked up the phone. "Hello, this is the paramedic. Are you still there?" A breath on the line, then a voice, faint and distorted. "I'm waiting upstairs." I looked around. There was no upstairs. The apartment was a single floor, sandwiched between 2 buildings with no room for expansion. "Sir, I'm in the apartment now. There's no one here. Can you tell me where you are?" "Second floor, rear apartment." "I'm in the second floor rear apartment right now." Another pause, then, "No, you're in the wrong building." I felt something tighten in my chest. I moved to the window, pulled back the curtain. The view looked out over a narrow courtyard I didn't recognize. Across the space, I saw another building, identical row houses, and in one of the windows a figure standing still, backlit by a faint glow, watching me. I stepped back, checked the MDT on my belt, 14 Ashland Court. The GPS pin was centered directly on my location. but the view outside suggested I was looking at Ashland from the wrong side, from a building that shouldn't exist. I left the apartment and descended the stairs. Jamie was waiting by the rig, arms crossed. Anything? No patient, but dispatch says the caller's still on the line, and he thinks we're in the wrong place. She frowned. We're exactly where the GPS says. I looked back at the alley entrance. The plaque still read 14. But now, standing at street level, I could see another number partially visible beneath it. Faint, weathered, barely legible. 40. I keyed the radio again. Dispatch, can you confirm the address one more time? Caller might have transposed the numbers. 14 Ashland Court, confirmed with caller twice. He's insisting you're not there yet. I felt the city tilt slightly around me. Jamie was already pulling up the map on her phone. She zoomed in, frowned, then showed me the screen. According to the map, there were 2 Ashland Courts, one in our current zone, one in a neighborhood 8 blocks south, both labeled identically. That can't be right, she said. But when I checked the MDT, the GPS pin had shifted. It was no longer centered on our location. It was drifting slowly south as if recalculating in real time, pulling us toward the other Ashland. We got back in the rig. Jamie drove. I watched the streets slide past, the numbers on the buildings rearranging themselves in ways that didn't make sense. We passed 12 Ashland twice, then 18. Then a gap where 22 should have been. The city felt unstable, like it was rewriting itself as we moved through it, shifting addresses to match some pattern I couldn't see. When we finally reached the second Ashland Court, the GPS pin had moved again. Now it was 2 blocks west. We followed it. It moved again. And again. Each time we got close, the address slipped further away, like a target that only existed in relation to our position. After 40 minutes, dispatch pulled us off the call. Caller had disconnected. No patient contact. No follow-up information. We cleared and returned to service. But 2 weeks later, I was dispatched to the same address. 14 Ashland Court. Difficulty breathing. Possible asthma exacerbation. 28-year-old male. The details were identical, word for word. I told dispatch I'd been there before. They insisted it was a new call, different caller ID, different timestamp. But when we arrived, the same thing happened. The numbers shifted, the alley appeared. The apartment was empty. The phone was on the table, call timer running. This time I answered it before it could ring. This is Paramedic Garrett. Who am I speaking with? The voice on the other end was quiet, familiar. You came last time too. Last time? 2 weeks ago, you couldn't find me. Where are you? Same place. You're just looking in the wrong year. The line went dead. I pulled the call history from the MDT that night. Cross-referenced every dispatch to Ashland Court over the past 5 years. I found 3. All identical. All for a 28-year-old male with difficulty breathing. All at 14 Ashland Court. Different dates, different crews, but the same narrative in the incident reports. Patient not found, address inaccessible, cleared without contact. I looked up the property records. 14 Ashland Court existed, but only as a cadastral designation. It had been demolished in 2007 to widen the alley access between 12 and 16. No structure had stood there for 19 years. But the calls kept coming, and the GPS kept insisting it was real. I started keeping a log. Every time we were dispatched to an address that felt wrong, I noted the details, the shifted numbers, the transposed streets, the buildings that appeared only when I wasn't looking directly at them. Over 6 months, I documented 42 incidents, all in the same quarter of the city, all involving addresses that existed in records but not in reality. Then last month, I was dispatched to a cardiac arrest at 63 Brennan Street. I knew the block. I'd run it a dozen times. But when we arrived, the building numbers had changed. 61, 65, no 63, just a gap filled with scaffolding and construction barriers. No active work, no permits posted, just emptiness. I got out, walked the perimeter, found a door hidden behind the scaffolding, no number, no lock. It opened into a stairwell that smelled like damp concrete and rust. I climbed 3 flights and found an apartment, door ajar. Inside, a man on the floor, unresponsive, pulseless. I started CPR. Jamie brought the monitor. We worked the arrest for 22 minutes, no return of circulation pronounced on scene. While we waited for the medical examiner, I checked his wallet. The ID listed his address as 63 Brennan Street. Date of birth, March 4th, 1996. The same year I was born. I looked closer at his face. The bone structure was similar, the hairline, the shape of his hands. It took me a long moment to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't identical, but it was close. Too close. The medical examiner arrived and took custody of the body. I filed the report, logged the details, and cleared the scene. But when I checked the property records later that night, I found something that made my hands go cold. 63 Brennan Street had been issued a demolition permit in 2009. The building had been condemned after a fire. No survivors. The listed occupant was a 28-year-old male. Name, Christopher Garrett. My middle name is Christopher. My father's first name was Garrett. I pulled up the fire report. Cause undetermined. Time of incident, 01:14 a.m. The same time I was born. I haven't been back to that part of the city since. I requested a zone transfer and dispatch approved it without question. But last week I was covering a shift in the North End when I got a call to 14 Ashland Court. Same details, same patient description. I told dispatch I couldn't take it. They asked why. I couldn't explain. They sent another unit. I listened to the radio traffic. The crew arrived on scene. Couldn't find the address. Dispatch kept insisting they were in the right place. The conversation looped for 18 minutes before they cleared without contact. I looked up the crew roster that night. The lead medic was someone I didn't recognize. I called the station and asked about him. They told me he'd been with the service for 3 years. Solid performer, reliable. I asked for his first name. They said Christopher. I don't think the city is shifting the addresses. I think the city is showing me where I've already been, or where I'm supposed to go. And every time I get close, something pulls the coordinates just out of reach, like it's waiting for me to finally arrive at the right time. Some calls are never meant to be completed. They're just meant to remind you that you've been circling the same block your entire life, and eventually you'll recognize the door you've been avoiding. Story 3. The Night Supervisor's Incident Report, Marv 0. I found it at 2:37 a.m. buried in the shift summary queue on the supervisor's terminal. Incident Report Case Number 0. Filed at 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before my shift officially started. The timestamp didn't make sense. I'd clocked in at midnight. No calls had been dispatched yet. The board was clear. But the report existed. And it was written in first person. My voice. At 01:12, I was notified of a delayed response involving Unit 4. The crew reported equipment failure at the scene of a structure fire on Hadley Avenue. I authorized a secondary unit and logged the delay as procedural. Upon review, I noted discrepancies in the timeline that suggested the delay was not technical but deliberate. I have escalated this matter for administrative review. I read it 3 times. I hadn't written it. I hadn't been notified of any delayed response. Unit 4 was currently on standby across town. Hadley Avenue hadn't come across the dispatch board all night. But the report was filed under my credentials, stamped with my supervisor ID, and logged in the official incident database. I checked the metadata, filed by Supervisor Alan Kern, location North Dispatch Hub. Device ID matched my terminal, but I hadn't touched the system until 15 minutes ago, and that was just to pull up the staffing roster. I opened a new window and searched for case number 0 in the archive. Nothing. Tried filtering by date, by unit, by keyword, still nothing. But when I refreshed the shift summary queue, the report reappeared at the top of the list, unread, as if I'd never opened it. I printed a copy and set it beside my coffee. Then I waited. At 01:12 a.m., exactly as described in the report, the radio crackled. Dispatch Unit 4 were delayed on scene due to equipment issue, requesting secondary unit for support. I felt the air go thin. I keyed the mic. Unit 4 described the issue. Hydraulic failure on the spreaders. We're at a structure fire, Hadley Avenue, heavy entrapment, need backup now. I dispatched Unit 7 and logged the delay exactly as the report had described. Procedural, technical, authorized, but my hands were shaking as I typed. When the call cleared, I pulled up case number 0 again. It had updated. New text had been added at the bottom. At 01:43, I reviewed dispatch logs and identified a recurring pattern in delayed responses involving Unit 4. Upon further investigation, I confirmed that the delays were not random but corresponded to incidents where my direct intervention was required. I have documented this pattern and submitted findings to regional oversight. The timestamp on the update was 01:19, 4 minutes ago. But I hadn't written anything. I hadn't even thought about patterns or oversight. I was still processing the fact that the first report had predicted the call. I opened the dispatch archive and pulled Unit 4's history. Over the past 6 months, they'd logged 9 delayed responses, all during my shifts, all involving equipment failures or procedural issues that required supervisor authorization. The intervals were irregular, but the outcomes were identical. I intervened, logged the delay, and cleared the incident without follow-up. I hadn't noticed the pattern before, but now, looking at it, it felt deliberate, like someone was testing whether I'd escalate or bury it. I picked up the phone and called the regional supervisor. Voicemail. Left a message summarizing what I'd found. Hung up and returned to the terminal. Case number 0 had updated again. At 02:51, I contacted regional oversight and reported my findings. I was advised to continue monitoring and document all further incidents involving Unit 4. I have updated the case file accordingly and remain on standby for additional instructions. The timestamp read 02:18, 33 minutes into the future. I stared at the screen. The report wasn't predicting events, it was narrating them as if they'd already happened, as if I'd already made every decision, taken every action, and filed every note. It was documenting inevitability. I tried logging out. The system refused. Tried closing the case file. It reappeared instantly, tried deleting it. Access denied. The terminal displayed an error message. Case files assigned to active supervisors cannot be removed during shift hours. I pushed back from the desk and walked to the break room. Made another coffee. Stood by the window watching the parking lot, empty except for the ambulances staged under the floodlights. Normal. Quiet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was performing actions that had already been written. When I returned to the terminal, case number 0 had updated again. At 03:32, I attempted to remove the case file from the system. The attempt was unsuccessful. I have concluded that the documentation process is no longer discretionary, and have accepted that my role is to confirm recorded outcomes rather than influence them. I remain on duty and will continue to monitor for discrepancies. The timestamp was 02:54. I checked my watch. 02:56. I sat down and read the entire report from the beginning. It now spanned 4 pages. Every action I'd taken since midnight was documented. Every decision, every hesitation. The language was clinical, detached, procedural. But it was unmistakably my voice. The phrasing, the structure, the way I defaulted to passive constructions to avoid assigning blame. At the bottom of the report, a new section had appeared. At 0407, let's say, I received a dispatch for a multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 73. Upon arrival of Unit 6, the scene commander reported multiple fatalities and requested additional supervisory support. I responded in person and assumed incident command. During the investigation, I identified procedural failures that directly contributed to the outcome. I have documented these failures and submitted the report for review. I have also recommended disciplinary action against the crew involved. I looked at the timestamp. 0318, 49 minutes into the future. The radio was silent, no calls pending. I checked the highway patrol feed. No incidents reported on Interstate 73. But the report was specific. Multi-vehicle collision, multiple fatalities, procedural failures. I picked up the phone and called Unit 6. The medic answered on the second ring. "This is Supervisor Kern. What's your current status?" "Stand by at the East Plaza. All clear." "Why?" "Just checking in. Stay available." I hung up and returned to the terminal. The report had updated. At 0324, I contacted Unit 6 to verify their status. The crew confirmed they were on standby. I did not inform them of the predicted incident. I have concluded that intervention is not advisable and that the documented outcome will occur regardless of preemptive action. The timestamp was 0319, 5 minutes ago. I stood up and walked out of the dispatch hub, got in my car, drove toward Interstate 73. I didn't know what I was trying to prevent or confirm. I just needed to see it for myself. At 0358, I reached the interstate. Traffic was light, no accidents, no delays. I pulled onto the shoulder near mile marker 81 and waited. At 0407, exactly as documented, I saw headlights swerve in my rearview mirror. 3 vehicles. The first lost control. The second couldn't brake in time. The third collided with both. Metal screaming, glass shattering. The sound carried across the empty highway like a recording played at the wrong speed. I called it in. Dispatch sent Unit 6. I stayed on scene and assumed incident command. The scene commander reported 2 fatalities. I reviewed the crew's actions and identified the procedural failure. A delayed intubation, a missed protocol. Small errors compounded. I documented everything, submitted the report, recommended disciplinary action. When I returned to the dispatch hub at 0541, case number 0 had updated one final time. At 0543, I completed my review of the incident and confirmed that all documented actions were consistent with predicted outcomes. I have concluded that the case file serves not as a predictive tool but as a confirmation mechanism. My role is not to prevent incidents but to ensure accountability after they occur. I have accepted this function and will continue to fulfill it as required. The timestamp was 0541, 2 minutes into the future. I sat down, read the report in full. It ended with a single line, added at 0542. Supervisor Kern acknowledged receipt and understanding of case number 0. No further action required. I didn't type anything, I didn't acknowledge anything, but the report logged it anyway. As if my silence was confirmation enough. Case number 0 remains open. It updates every shift. Sometimes it documents incidents that haven't happened yet. Sometimes it records decisions I haven't made. But every time the outcomes match. Word for word, I stopped trying to change them. I stopped trying to delete the file. I just read it at the start of each shift and follow the script. Because the system isn't interested in what I choose. It's interested in confirming that I'll always choose what's already been written. Some accountability isn't about preventing failure. It's about ensuring someone is assigned to carry it forward. Story 4. The Interfacility Transfer Medic and the Silent Monitor. The transport was routine. Stable patient, 64-year-old male, post-operative day 3, transferring from County General to a long-term care facility 15 miles south. Vitals were solid. No active complaints. The sending nurse handed me a stack of transfer paperwork, wished us luck, and we rolled out at 22:30 hours. I was riding in the back with the patient. My partner, Renee, was driving. The patient was awake, calm, conversational. We'd been on the road maybe 8 minutes when I noticed the monitor. It was displaying a cardiac rhythm. Clean, regular. Sinus rhythm at 72 beats per minute. Normal axis, no ectopy, textbook. Except I hadn't connected the patient to the monitor. I glanced at the 12-lead cable, coiled neatly on the bench seat beside me, untouched. The pulse oximeter was clipped to the patient's finger, but that only tracked oxygen saturation and pulse rate. It didn't generate a full ECG waveform, and the blood pressure cuff wasn't active. The monitor's screen showed lead 2, clear and stable, scrolling from right to left in real time. I leaned forward and checked the cable ports. All empty, no leads attached, no input source, but the waveform continued, steady and synchronized, as if the patient's heart was transmitting directly to the screen without physical connection. I keyed the intercom. "Renee, you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" "Monitor's showing a rhythm, but I didn't hook him up." There was a pause, then, "Maybe the last crew left it running?" "There's no leads connected." Another pause. "Check the settings. Might be pulling old data from memory." I cycled through the monitor's menu. No saved rhythms, no stored data. The timestamp on the waveform was current. It updated every second, synchronized perfectly with the passing mile markers outside the window. I looked at the patient. He was watching me with mild curiosity. "Something wrong?" "No, sir. Just checking the equipment." I placed my fingers on his wrist, counted his pulse manually. 72 beats per minute. Exactly what the monitor displayed. I disconnected the pulse oximeter. The rhythm on the monitor didn't change. Turned off the blood pressure cuff. Still no change. I even powered down the monitor completely, waited 10 seconds and powered it back on. The screen flickered, initialized, and the rhythm reappeared immediately. Lead 2, 72 beats per minute. Same waveform, same patient. I keyed the intercom again. "Renee, can you call the sending facility? Ask if they connected the patient to a telemetry system or anything unusual." Copy. I sat back and watched the monitor. The waveform was flawless. No artifact, no drift, no electrical interference from the vehicle's movement. Just clean, consistent cardiac activity, as if the monitor had been calibrated specifically for this patient and was now tracking him without needing physical contact. Renee's voice crackled over the intercom. "Sending facility says they didn't connect him to anything. Patient was on bedside telemetry during admission, but it was discontinued yesterday. No active monitoring at time of discharge." Copy. I leaned closer to the screen. The rhythm was so stable it almost looked artificial. No respiratory variation, no subtle rate changes, just 72 beats per minute, unwavering like a metronome. Then I noticed something. The waveform wasn't just stable, it was synced, not to the patient's pulse, to mine. I checked my own pulse again. 72 beats per minute. I held my breath. The waveform continued. I exhaled slowly, deliberately extending the breath. My pulse dipped slightly. 70 beats per minute. The waveform on the monitor dipped with it. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I looked at the patient. He was still calm, still watching me. "You feeling okay?" I asked. "Fine." "Why?" "Just making sure." I turned back to the monitor, took a deep breath, held it for 10 seconds. My pulse climbed. 74, 76, 78. The waveform on the screen climbed with it, beat for beat, as if it was reading my heart instead of his. I released the breath. My pulse dropped back to 72. The monitor matched. I disconnected the power cable. The monitor switched to battery backup. The rhythm didn't change. I covered the screen with my jacket. The waveform continued scrolling underneath, faint but visible through the fabric. Renee's voice came over the intercom. "ETA 10 minutes. How's he doing?" I looked at the patient. His color was good. Respiratory rate normal. He didn't seem distressed. But when I checked his pulse again, it was different, slower. 68 beats per minute. The monitor still displayed 72. I moved my fingers to my own wrist. 72 beats per minute. Exactly synchronized with the screen. The patient noticed me staring at the monitor. "Is that my heart?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer, so I just said, "It's showing a rhythm." "Whose?" "I'm not sure yet." He nodded slowly, like that made sense. Then he closed his eyes and settled back into the stretcher. His pulse remained steady at 68. The monitor continued displaying 72. My pulse, my rhythm, my heart. We reached the receiving facility at 23:14 hours. I disconnected everything, transferred the patient to the staff, and handed over the paperwork. The receiving nurse asked if there were any complications during transport. I told her no. She signed the transfer log and we cleared. I didn't mention the monitor. I didn't know how to explain it, but when we returned to the rig, I checked the device. Powered it down completely, removed the battery, and left it disconnected for a full minute. When I reconnected it and powered it on, the screen was blank. Normal startup sequence. No residual data, no waveform. I ran a systems check. All channels clear. No anomalies detected. Renee climbed into the driver's seat. "We good?" "Yeah, all clear." We drove back to the station in silence. I tried to convince myself it had been a glitch, a software error, cross-interference from another unit's telemetry. But I couldn't stop thinking about the synchronization, the way the waveform had matched my pulse, not the patient's, the way it had tracked every breath, every heartbeat, as if the monitor had decided I was the one who needed observation. 3 days later, I was assigned another transfer. Different patient, different facility, same rig, same monitor. I didn't connect any leads. I powered on the monitor and waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. LED 2 appeared. 74 beats per minute, sinus rhythm, clean and stable. I checked the patient's pulse. 82 beats per minute, irregular, occasional ectopy. I checked my own pulse, 74 beats per minute, regular. Synchronized with the screen, I powered down the monitor immediately. Filed a maintenance report, requested a replacement unit. The station supervisor approved it the next day. They swapped out the monitor, ran diagnostics on the old one, found nothing wrong, cleared it for return to service. But 2 weeks later, I was assigned to a rig that happened to have the same monitor. Different vehicle, different zone, same device serial number. I didn't power it on. I pulled the battery and locked it in the equipment cabinet. Told my partner there was a malfunction and we'd use the backup. She didn't ask questions. That night after the shift ended, I checked my locker. Inside, I found a printout, a single strip of ECG paper, about 12 inches long, LED 2, 72 beats per minute. The timestamp was from 2 weeks earlier, the night of the first transfer. At the bottom of the strip, written in pencil, was a single notation. Rhythm confirmed, monitoring continues. I don't know who left it, I don't know how they accessed my locker, but the handwriting was neat, clinical, deliberate. The kind of notation a paramedic would make during a critical call. The kind I would make. I burned the printout, requested a transfer to a different station. It was approved without explanation. But last month, during a routine shift, I was restocking the rig when I found another strip of ECG paper tucked into the monitor's carrying case. Same rhythm, same notation, same handwriting. But the timestamp was from the future, 3 days ahead. I checked the date on my phone. It was accurate. The strip was documenting a rhythm I hadn't experienced yet, but I recognized the waveform. It was mine. I don't carry a watch anymore. I don't check my pulse. I try not to think about the monitor or the rhythm or the notation. But every time I power on a cardiac monitor, I see it for just a second before the screen fully initializes. Lead 2. 72 beats per minute, synchronized perfectly with something I can't disconnect. Some equipment doesn't need a patient to function. It just needs someone who's learned to breathe in rhythm. Story 5. The rural backup paramedic's unanswered radio check. I was covering Zone 18 alone that night. It was a 23-mile stretch of rural highway, scattered farmhouses, 2 crossroads, and a volunteer fire station that hadn't been staffed in years. Quiet zone, low call volume, mostly transfers and minor injuries. The kind of shift where you spend more time reading or listening to dispatch chatter than actually running calls. At 0233, I performed a routine radio check. Standard procedure, every hour on the hour, or whenever dispatch requested it. I keyed the mic and spoke into the receiver mounted on the dashboard. Dispatch, Unit 14, radio check. I expected the usual response. Unit 14 dispatch, you're clear and readable. Instead, I got static. Then a voice. Unit 14, radio check. It was my voice. Same cadence, same inflection, but distorted like it was being played through a broken speaker or transmitted from very far away. I released the mic and stared at the radio. The transmission light was off. No active signal. But I could still hear the voice faintly through the speaker, repeating the same phrase. Unit 14, radio check. I keyed the mic again. Dispatch, this is Unit 14, confirm you're receiving. Silence. Then after a 5-second delay, the voice returned. Dispatch, this is Unit 14, confirm you're receiving. It was an exact echo, not just the words, but the pauses, the breath control, the slight hesitation before confirm. Everything. I tried a different channel, same result, switched to the backup frequency. Still the same voice, repeating my transmissions with a delay that felt intentional, like it was waiting for me to speak first before responding. I grabbed my cell phone and called dispatch directly. The dispatcher on duty was a woman named Holly, reliable and efficient. She answered on the second ring. This is Unit 14. I'm having an issue with the radio. Are you receiving my transmissions? We've got you on the log. Last check was at 0233. Came through clear. Why? I'm getting feedback. Someone's repeating my transmissions. There was a pause. Repeating how? Word for word, same voice. Delayed by a few seconds. Hold on. I heard her typing, then a brief exchange with someone in the background. She came back on the line. We're not showing any other units on your frequency. Could be cross-interference from a neighboring county. Try switching to channel 3 and checking again. Already tried. Same issue. Okay. I'll log it. If it continues, switch to cell communication and we'll send a tech to check the equipment in the morning. Copy, thanks. I ended the call and sat in the rig staring at the radio. The transmission light was still off, but I could hear faint static underneath the silence, like the channel was open even though I wasn't transmitting. Then the voice came back. Unit 14, dispatch. 0247 engine fire, County Road 18. Reporting party states vehicle fully involved, no injuries, requesting response. I felt my pulse spike. That wasn't dispatch. That was me, reading dispatch notes. But I hadn't said anything, and no call had come through. I keyed the mic. Dispatch, did you just send a call to Unit 14? Holly's voice crackled through clearly. Negative. Board's clear. Why? I'm hearing transmissions that aren't coming from you. Describe them. Dispatch traffic, call details. But in my voice. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you feeling okay? I'm fine. But something's wrong with the radio. Copy, stand by. I waited. The static continued. Then the voice returned, clearer now. Unit 14, dispatch 0312, unconscious party, 17 County Road 18. Caller reports no pulse. CPR in progress, requesting immediate response. I checked the MDT. No call. Board was clear. But the voice had been specific, 17 County Road 18. I knew the address. It was a farmhouse about 6 miles north, just inside the zone boundary. I'd been there once before, years ago. Elderly resident, diabetic emergency, stable outcome. I picked up the cell phone and called Holly. The transmission I'm hearing just gave me an address, 17 County Road 18. Are you showing anything there? Negative. No calls from that location. Can you do a welfare check? Just to confirm? I'll contact the sheriff's office. Stand by. I stayed on the line while she coordinated with county dispatch. After 3 minutes, she came back. Sheriff's deputy is en route. ETA 10 minutes. I'll update you when they confirm. Copy. I set the phone down and listened to the radio. The static had changed. It was rhythmic now, almost like breathing. Then the voice came back, quieter this time. Unit 14, dispatch. Patient unresponsive. Asystole confirmed. Resuscitation efforts unsuccessful. Pronounced on scene at 0326. Medical examiner notified. I felt something tighten in my chest. The timestamp was 14 minutes into the future, but the call details were precise. Patient status, outcome, time of death. My phone rang. Holly. Deputy just confirmed. Unconscious party at 17 County Road 18. Caller is on scene. They're requesting immediate medical response. I didn't wait for her to finish. I started the engine and rolled out, lights and sirens. The drive took 8 minutes. When I arrived, the sheriff's deputy was standing in the driveway, flashlight in hand. He waved me toward the house. Inside, I found an elderly man on the living room floor. Unresponsive, no pulse, no respiratory effort. I started CPR immediately, called for backup, and worked the arrest for 19 minutes. The monitor showed asystole throughout, no shockable rhythm, no return of circulation. At 0326, exactly as the voice had stated, I pronounced him on scene. The deputy took my statement. The medical examiner arrived and took custody of the body. I cleared at 0402 and returned to the rig. The radio was silent. No static, no transmissions, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. I keyed the mic. Dispatch Unit 14, back in service, Holly responded immediately. Copy Unit 14, you okay? Yeah, just need to file the report. Take your time. I logged the incident on the MDT and sat in the driver's seat staring at the radio. The voice hadn't been wrong. It had been exact. Address, condition, outcome, time of death. Every detail had matched. I checked the transmission log on the MDT. It showed my radio check at 0233, nothing after that. No record of the voice, no indication that any transmissions had occurred between my check and the call. But I'd heard it, clear and specific, and it had known. Over the next 3 shifts, the voice returned, always during radio checks. always delayed by a few seconds. Sometimes it repeated my transmissions. Sometimes it provided call details before dispatch sent them. Addresses I hadn't been to yet. Patients I hadn't assessed. Outcomes I hadn't documented. At first I thought it was predictive, a glitch in the system pulling data from future logs. But the details were too specific, too personal. It knew which calls I would take, which routes I would drive, which decisions I would make on scene. Then 2 weeks ago, the voice gave me coordinates. Unit 14, dispatch, 0144, single vehicle rollover, mile marker 73, County Road 9, no caller information, hazard reported by passing motorist. I checked with Holly, no call, no hazard reported. But I drove to the location anyway, found nothing, empty road, no accident, no debris. I keyed the mic. Dispatch Unit 14 on scene at mile marker 73, no hazard visible. The voice responded immediately. Unit 14, check the ditch, driver's side, 30 feet from the road. I got out and walked the shoulder. 30 feet into the ditch, I found tire tracks. Fresh. Leading to a shallow embankment. At the bottom, partially obscured by tall grass, was a vehicle on its side. Engine cold, driver unconscious but breathing. No cell signal in the area, no way they could have called for help. I stabilized the patient and called for backup. Transport to County General. Outcome, stable. When I returned to the rig, I keyed the mic. Who are you? The voice didn't answer, just static. I tried again. How do you know where the calls are? Still static, then faint and distant, same way you do. I stopped performing radio checks after that, switched to cell communication exclusively. But the voice still appears. Not on the radio, in my head, just before a call comes through. Just before dispatch sends the coordinates. It tells me where to go, what I'll find, how it will end, and every time it's right. Some channels never close. They just wait for you to realize you've been broadcasting on them your entire career. Story 6. The training officer's final ride-along. I was assigned to supervise a trainee named Caitlin Marsh on her final evaluation ride. It was a standard 12-hour shift, 0600 to 1800 covering the Northwest Zone. High call volume, mixed acuity, urban and suburban mix. A good test for someone finishing their probationary period. I met her at the station at 0545. She was early, organized, had her gear staged and ready. Good signs. We did the rig check together, reviewed the equipment, ran through protocols. She was confident, articulate, knew her stuff. I made a note on the evaluation form. Well prepared, no hesitation. The first call came through at 0632. Difficulty breathing, possible COPD exacerbation, third floor walk-up on Brennan Street. Standard call. I let Caitlin take the lead. She grabbed the jump bag, took the stairs without complaint, introduced herself to the patient and started her assessment. But before she placed the pulse oximeter on the patient's finger, she said, "Saturation's going to be 84%. We'll need high-flow oxygen and a nebulizer treatment before transport." I frowned. "You haven't checked yet." "I know. But it will be." She clipped the pulse oximeter to the patient's finger. The reading stabilized at 84%. I made another note on the form, but I didn't say anything. Lucky guess. Pattern recognition. It happens. The second call was a syncopal episode at a grocery store. Elderly woman standing in the checkout line suddenly collapsed. Caitlin assessed her on scene, checked her blood sugar, and said, "Glucose is going to be 41. She's a diabetic, probably skipped breakfast." I watched her check the glucometer. 41. "How did you know?" I asked. "I don't know. I just did." The third call was a pediatric fever. Caitlin examined the child, took vitals, and said, "Temperature's 103.6. Febrile seizure risk. We should transport even though the parents are hesitant." She was right. Temperature 103.6. Parents initially refused transport. Caitlin convinced them. During the ride to the hospital, the child seized. Brief, self-limited, resolved with supportive care. But if we'd left the child at home, the outcome could have been different. I waited until we cleared the call, then pulled her aside. "Caitlin, how are you anticipating these findings?" She looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, I've done this before. You're a trainee, this is your final evaluation. You haven't done any of these calls before." "I know, but it feels like I have." I checked her training file that night. She completed her clinical rotations at County General, logged her required ride time, passed all her practical exams. Clean record, no flags. But when I reviewed her call logs, I noticed something strange. Every call she'd run during training had been documented in detail. Patient assessments, treatment decisions, outcomes. The notes were thorough, professional, and consistent. But some of the calls were dated 3 months into the future. I assumed it was a clerical error, a timestamp glitch in the database. I flagged it for the training coordinator and moved on. The next day, we ran another shift together. 6 calls, all routine, but Caitlin anticipated every patient's condition before completing her assessment. Blood pressure, heart rate, blood sugar, oxygen saturation. She called them out before checking, and every time she was correct. On the 4th call, a chest pain patient, she said, "He's having an inferior MI. ST elevation in leads 2, 3, and AVF. We need to start an IV, give aspirin, and transport immediately." I hadn't connected the 12 lead yet, but when I did, the monitor showed exactly what she'd described. Inferior wall myocardial infarction, textbook presentation. "Caitlin, stop." She looked at me confused. "How do you know what the monitor's going to show before I connect it?" "I've seen it." "When?" "Last time." "There is no last time. This is your final evaluation." She didn't respond, just turned back to the patient and continued treatment. IV established, aspirin administered, transport initiated. The patient was stable on arrival at the cardiac center. Outcome: successful intervention. I filed the evaluation report that night, but I didn't sign it. Instead, I requested a meeting with the training coordinator. I brought the call logs, the timestamp discrepancies, and my notes from the ride-along. The coordinator reviewed everything, then pulled up Caitlin's file on her computer. She frowned. "This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't?" "Her final evaluation was completed 6 months ago, signed by you. She's been a certified paramedic since March." I felt something shift in my chest. "I didn't sign any evaluation 6 months ago. I just met her 2 days ago." The coordinator turned the screen toward me. The evaluation form was complete. Detailed notes on every call, performance ratings, final recommendation, approved for certification. At the bottom, my signature, dated March 19th. "That's not possible," I said. She zoomed in on the signature. It was mine. Not a forgery, not a scan. The handwriting was exact down to the way I looped the capital letters. I checked the date on my phone, September 23rd, 6 months after the evaluation was supposedly completed. The coordinator closed the file. "I'll escalate this to HR. There's obviously a database issue." But I couldn't let it go. That night, I went back through my personal records, checked my calendar, my shift logs, my emails, found an entry from March 19th. Final evaluation, Caitlin Marsh. 0600 to 1800 hours, Northwest Zone. I didn't remember it, but the entry was there, written in my handwriting in my personal planner. And below it, a single note. She knew everything before I did. I called Caitlin and asked her to meet me. She agreed. We met at a coffee shop near the station. I brought the evaluation form, the call logs, and the calendar entry. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Have we done this before?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. 3 times. 3 times? This is the 4th evaluation. Every time you ask the same questions. Every time I give the same answers. And every time you file the same report. That's not possible. I know, but it keeps happening. Why? She leaned forward. Because you keep forgetting. Every time we finish the evaluation, the timeline resets. You go back to the beginning, and we start over. I felt the room tilt. Why would I forget? I don't think you forget. I think you're not supposed to remember, but I do. I remember every shift, every call, every conversation, and every time you figure it out near the end. Right around now. I looked down at the evaluation form. My signature was already there, dated March 19th. But I was holding a pen in my hand, ready to sign it again. "What happens if I don't sign it?" I asked. "You always sign it. You have to. It's the only way the cycle completes." I set the pen down. "I'm not signing it." She smiled, but it was sad, resigned. "You will. You always do." I left the coffee shop without signing, went home, tried to make sense of it. But the next morning I woke up and checked my calendar. March 19th. Final evaluation, Caitlin Marsh. 0600 to 1800 hours. I drove to the station. Caitlin was already there, gear staged, ready to go. She looked at me and said, "Good morning, Officer Brennan. Ready for the evaluation?" I stared at her. "We've done this before." She didn't answer, just smiled and climbed into the rig. We ran the same calls, same addresses, same patients, same outcomes. She anticipated everything. I asked the same questions. She gave the same answers. And at the end of the shift, I found myself sitting in the station office, holding the evaluation form, pen in hand. My signature was already there, dated today. I signed it anyway. Because I realized she was right. I always do. Some training never ends. It just repeats until you finally accept that the student has been teaching you the entire time. Story 6. The laundry worker's folding cart. The cart appeared in the 3rd-floor laundry closet on a Monday morning in early December, approximately 2 weeks after I started working at Thornwood Care Center. I was alone at the time, starting my 6 a.m. shift, unlocking the industrial washer and dryer units to begin the day's loads. The closet was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, lined with wire shelving that held detergents and folding supplies. When I'd locked up Friday evening, the closet contained exactly what it should. Cleaning products, laundry baskets, nothing unusual. Monday morning, there was a folding cart pushed against the back wall. The cart itself was standard issue, metal frame, canvas sides, the kind used throughout the facility to transport clean laundry. But it was filled with clothing, neatly folded items stacked precisely, sorted by type, shirts, pants, sweaters, undergarments, maybe 40 or 50 pieces total. My first assumption was that someone had left a cart of sorted laundry over the weekend, and I'd somehow missed it Friday. But the closet had been locked. I was the only staff member with a key to this particular storage space. The day shift laundry worker, Margaret, had her own key, but she wouldn't have been in over the weekend. We didn't run weekend laundry. Residents' clothing was processed Monday through Friday. Family laundry pickups happened on Thursdays. I pulled the cart out into the light to examine the contents. The clothing was old, not worn out, but distinctly outdated in style. Women's blouses with high collars and fabric-covered buttons, the kind I associated with 1980s fashion. Men's polyester slacks in colors nobody wore anymore. Rust brown, sage green. Everything was clean and carefully folded, smelling faintly of a detergent I didn't recognize. Not the industrial, unscented product we used. This was something floral, pleasant, a perfume-like quality that reminded me of my grandmother's linen closet from my childhood. I checked for name tags. Thornwood protocol required all resident clothing to be labeled with permanent marker on the interior tags, last name and room number. I unfolded several pieces. No markings. The tags were vintage, too. Brand names I vaguely recognized as department stores that had gone out of business in the 90s or early 2000s. I refolded everything and left the cart in the closet. Probably a donation someone had dropped off incorrectly. Happened occasionally. Families brought deceased relatives' clothing thinking we could use it for residents who needed replacements. Usually those donations came through the front desk with proper documentation, but maybe someone had taken a shortcut, left items directly in the laundry area. I made a mental note to ask Margaret about it when she came in at 2 p.m. for the afternoon shift. Then I started my regular work, collecting soiled laundry from resident rooms, sorting by temperature and fabric type, loading the washers, running the cycles. We processed approximately 120 pounds of laundry daily across 38 residents. Routine, methodical, physically demanding, but not complicated. At noon, I took my lunch break in the staff room. When I returned to the laundry closet at 12:30 to move loads from washers to dryers, the cart was gone. I checked the hallway, checked the folding room across the corridor, checked the linen storage. No cart. It had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. I asked the charge nurse if anyone had been in the laundry area. She checked the logbook. Only me. No other staff had reason to access the closet during morning shift. I told her about the cart, described the contents. She looked at me strangely and suggested maybe I'd seen someone else's cart temporarily stored there. I let it drop. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., the cart was back. Same location, pushed against the back wall of the locked closet. But the contents were different. Now it held children's clothing, small sizes, toddler range, little dresses with smocking across the chest, tiny overalls, miniature cardigans. All vintage, all immaculate, all carrying that same distinctive floral detergent scent. Thornwood didn't have pediatric residents. We were an adult care facility, age 55 and up. There was no reason for children's clothing to be anywhere in the building. I lifted one of the dresses and examined it. The fabric was soft cotton, faded but well maintained. The label was hand-sewn, not printed, the kind mothers used to make before commercial tags became standard. The handwriting read Lila, age 3. I checked every item. Each one had a hand-sewn label with a child's name and age. Lila, Thomas, Emma, Michael. Ages ranging from 2 to 7. None of the names matched any staff members' children that I knew of. And even if they had, why would multiple families' children's clothing end up folded in my locked laundry closet? This time I took photos before the cart disappeared. I documented every item, every label, every detail. Then I continued my shift. At noon, predictably, the cart was gone when I returned from lunch. Wednesday morning, the cart contained men's clothing exclusively, dress shirts, slacks, ties, a few suit jackets, all sized for someone tall and thin based on the dimensions. I checked labels. These had commercial tags, brands from the 1970s. One jacket had a dry cleaning tag still attached, dated June 1976. 48 years old. The pattern was establishing itself. Cart appears overnight in locked closet. Contents are vintage clothing, meticulously folded, carrying that distinctive scent. Cart disappears during my lunch break. No one else reports seeing it. No explanation for how it's entering or leaving a secured space. Thursday morning, I arrived at 5:30 instead of 6 a.m., hoping to catch the cart in the process of appearing or being placed. The closet was empty. I sat in the hallway outside, waiting. At exactly 5:58, I heard something, a soft sound from inside the closet like fabric rustling. I unlocked the door immediately and threw it open. The cart was there, fully loaded with women's clothing, cardigans, skirts, blouses. The scent wafted out that floral detergent smell, strong and immediate. But there was no one in the closet. No way anyone could have entered, loaded a cart, and exited in the 2 seconds between the sound and my opening the door. The closet had no other entrance, no windows, no vents large enough for a person. I searched the items Thursday. These had labels, Thornwood labels, name and room number in faded permanent marker. But the rooms were wrong. Room numbers like 512, 518, 523. Thornwood only had 3 floors. Our highest room number was 342. There was no 5th floor. There never had been, according to the facility history in the staff handbook. Yet here was clothing marked for residents who supposedly lived on a non-existent floor. I unfolded a cardigan marked Eleanor Pritchard, 518, and examined it. The fabric was high quality, hand-knit, buttons made of wood. The style was timeless, could have been worn yesterday or 40 years ago. But the Thornwood label was identical to the ones we currently used. Same format, same marker style, same abbreviated room number format. I took the cardigan to the administrative office after my shift, showed it to the facility director, Denise, asked if there was any history of a 5th floor, maybe planned but never built, maybe demolished. Denise examined the label. Her expression shifted from mild interest to something else. Concern, maybe, or recognition. She asked where I'd found it. I explained the cart, the locked closet, the daily appearances and disappearances. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. "Since last Monday. 6 days now." She looked at the cardigan for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Thornwood was originally built as a 5-story facility in 1968. The top 2 floors were never completed due to budget constraints. The structure exists, the concrete and framing, but those levels were never fitted with interior systems or finishes. They're technically part of the building but are sealed off. No access from the main staircases or elevators. Could someone be using those floors for storage? The access points have been locked for decades. I don't even know where the keys are." I told her I'd continue documenting the cart's appearances. She kept the cardigan, said she'd look into it. I left with the distinct impression she knew more than she was saying. Friday morning, the cart contained my clothes. Not my work uniforms, my personal clothing. The jeans I'd worn yesterday folded neatly. The sweater I wore 3 days ago. The one I'd thrown in my bedroom laundry hamper. The socks I'd peeled off Thursday night. All of it cleaned, folded perfectly, arranged in the cart with that same precise organization. My hands started shaking. This was no longer a mystery or a curiosity. This was a violation. Someone had been in my apartment, had gone through my laundry, had taken my personal items and returned them through this impossible cart in a locked closet in my workplace. I checked the labels. My items didn't have Thornwood labels, they were just clothing. But underneath my folded jeans, I found something else. A piece of paper, notebook-sized, with handwriting. The message read, "These belong to you now. You'll find the initials inside the collar." I checked every item. My sweater had initials inside the collar, embroidered in tiny letters I'd never noticed before. EPT. Not my initials. I'm Lindsay Carson. LC, not EPT. I unfolded my jeans. Inside the waistband, hand-stitched in thread that matched the fabric, EPT. The socks, the shirt, every item had those initials hidden somewhere, sewn or embroidered in locations you wouldn't normally look. EPT. Eleanor Pritchard. Thornwood. The cardigan from yesterday. I started researching during my breaks. Facility records, online searches for the name Eleanor Pritchard in connection with Thornwood. I found an obituary from 1989. Eleanor Pritchard, resident of Thornwood Care Center, passed away peacefully at age 74. Survived by no immediate family. Services held at Thornwood's chapel. Her death was 35 years ago, but her clothing, or clothing marked with her initials, was appearing in my locked closet mixed with items from my personal life, suggesting a connection I couldn't understand. Saturday I didn't work, but I came in anyway. I needed to see if the cart appeared on weekends when I wasn't on shift. I arrived at 6 a.m., unlocked the closet. The cart was there, this time filled with uniforms. Thornwood staff uniforms, the kind worn by laundry workers. Multiple sets, all in size small, my size. Each one embroidered with a name tag above the breast pocket, Lindsay Carson, my name, my position. But the uniforms weren't mine. I'd never seen them before. The fabric was slightly different, a heavier weave. The embroidery style was older, thicker thread, less precise than modern machine embroidery. I counted 14 uniforms, representing approximately 3 weeks of work outfits. All labeled with my name, but clearly from a different era of the facility's operation. I pulled out my phone and called Denise, the director, even though it was Saturday morning and well outside business hours. She answered on the 5th ring, sounded tired. I told her I was at the facility, told her about the uniforms, told her I needed access to the sealed upper floors. She was silent for long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't go anywhere near the stairwell access without me." She arrived 45 minutes later with a maintenance worker named Gary who carried a toolbox and a ring of old keys. We went to the east stairwell, the one rarely used because it was furthest from the main activity areas. At the 3rd floor landing, there was a door marked "No access, maintenance only." The door was locked with a padlock that looked decades old. Gary tried several keys before finding one that worked. The padlock opened with a grinding sound of metal that hadn't moved in years. Behind that was a standard door lock, which took 3 more tries before Gary found the correct key. The door opened inward, releasing air that smelled stale and undisturbed. Beyond was another staircase, continuing upward. The steps were bare concrete, no finishing, no handrails. Construction lights had been installed at some point but weren't functioning. Gary had brought flashlights. We climbed. The 4th floor landing opened into a large space that was clearly unfinished. Exposed studs, concrete floor, bundled wiring hanging from ceiling joists. But in one corner, someone had created a makeshift room. Plastic sheeting served as walls, securing to the studs with zip ties. Inside, visible through a gap in the plastic, was furniture. A cot, a small table, shelving made from boards and cinder blocks, and laundry, piles and piles of clothing sorted into categories, folded and stacked. The organization was obsessive, meticulous. Everything arranged by type, size, color, creating a visual gradient across the shelving. The smell was strong here, that floral detergent concentrated in the enclosed space. Denise pulled back the plastic sheeting. We entered the makeshift room. The space was maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, lit by battery-powered lanterns. The cot had bedding, clean, folded, unused. The table held laundry supplies, detergent bottles from the 1980s, fabric softener and packaging I recognized from my childhood, a bar of soap wrapped in paper that had yellowed with age. On the shelving, among the stacked clothing, were labels, handwritten tags identifying each category. Women's cardigans, 512 to 524. Men's trousers, 502 to 510. Children's clothing, mixed. The room numbering system was consistent with what I'd seen on the cart items. This was storage for the non-existent 5th floor, for residents who had never existed or had existed only in someone's careful documentation. Gary found a notebook on the table. A ledger, actually, the old-fashioned kind with columns for data entry. Every page filled with handwriting, recording laundry services, dates, room numbers, items processed. The entries started in January 1986 and ended in November 1989. The handwriting was consistent throughout. One person had maintained this record for nearly 4 years. The final entry was dated November 14, 1989. Room 518, Eleanor Pritchard. Items: 2 cardigans, 3 blouses, 1 skirt, undergarments. Processed and folded. Returned to cart for delivery. Eleanor Pritchard had died November 16, 1989. 2 days after this final entry. Denise was reading over Gary's shoulder. She said quietly, "Eleanor worked here before she became a resident. She was the laundry worker in the 80s. I stared at the ledger. She documented laundry for a floor that didn't exist. Apparently for 4 years, yes. Why? Denise had no answer. We searched the space more thoroughly. No personal effects beyond the laundry supplies and ledger. No indication of why Eleanor had maintained this impossible record, why she'd documented services for residents of a phantom floor, why she'd spent 4 years folding and sorting clothing for people who weren't there. Then I noticed something. The handwriting in the ledger, the careful, precise script, matched the hand-sewn labels I'd seen on the children's clothing. Eleanor had made those labels. She'd created wardrobes for imaginary children, documented their care with the same attention she gave to real residents. We found more carts, 4 of them, pushed against the far wall of the unfinished 4th floor, hidden behind a stack of drywall panels. Each cart filled with clothing, sorted and folded, waiting for delivery to rooms that would never exist. I checked the items in these carts. All had the hand-sewn labels. Lila, Thomas, Emma, Michael. The names from the children's clothing I'd seen earlier. Eleanor's children, maybe? But the obituary said she'd had no immediate family. Denise made some calls. Over the next few days, I learned Eleanor Pritchard's history. She'd worked at Thornwood as a laundry assistant from 1972 until 1986. In '86, she was diagnosed with early-onset dementia at age 71 and transitioned to being a resident. She lived in room 318, the real 3rd floor, until her death 3 years later. During those final 3 years as a resident, she frequently wandered. Staff notes from the period described her trying to access the stairwells, insisting she had work to complete on the upper floors. She talked about residents on the 5th floor who needed their laundry. She became agitated when prevented from reaching the locked stairwell door. At some point, no one knew exactly when, she'd acquired keys and began accessing the unfinished 4th floor. She'd created that space, transported laundry supplies, set up her makeshift laundry room, and continued her work for residents who existed only in her deteriorating memory. The names on the hand-sewn labels, Lila, Thomas, Emma, Michael, were her children. All deceased before she came to work at Thornwood, lost in a house fire in 1967. She'd been 42. She never remarried, never had more children. She worked for Thornwood for 14 years, processing laundry, living a quiet life. And when dementia took her memory, she went looking for her children in the only way that made sense to her failing mind. By preparing their clothing, by documenting their care, by maintaining their wardrobes in a space that existed only in the building's unfinished structure and her own fractured recollection. The cart I'd been finding in my locked closet was one of Eleanor's delivery carts. Somehow it was still making its rounds, still appearing with loads of sorted laundry, still following whatever schedule she'd established 35 years ago. Denise had the 4th floor space cleared out. The carts were removed, the clothing donated, the makeshift room dismantled. The stairwell access was resecured with new locks. The unfinished floors were sealed more thoroughly than before. Monday morning, I returned to work. I arrived at 6 a.m., unlocked the laundry closet. The cart was there. One final load. Not vintage clothing this time. Current resident laundry, properly labeled with thornwood tags. Room numbers from the real floors, but folded with that same obsessive precision, carrying that same floral detergent scent. On top of the folded items was a note, the same handwriting from the ledger. Thank you for completing the deliveries. The children's items have been returned to their rooms. All accounts are current. Please ensure the 518 cardigan is properly stored. EPT. I delivered the current resident laundry to the appropriate rooms. Then I went to the administrative office and asked Denise if I could keep one item from the 4th floor clearance. She asked what item. I said the cardigan marked for Eleanor Pritchard, room 518. She retrieved it from the donation boxes that hadn't been shipped yet. I took it home, washed it in that same floral detergent I'd found a bottle of at the vintage store downtown. I folded it with the precise hospital corners I'd learned in laundry training, the technique that makes edges align perfectly. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because Eleanor had spent the last years of her life caring for people who existed only in her memory. And someone should acknowledge that work, should preserve some evidence that her impossible care had been real to her. The cart hasn't appeared since. The closet remains empty except for the supplies that should be there. My personal clothing stopped showing her initials. The floral scent has faded from the facility's laundry area. But sometimes, late in my shift, when I'm folding the final loads of the day, I swear I smell that detergent. And I wonder if Eleanor is somewhere else in the building, on some floor that exists between the architecture and memory, still processing laundry for children who are eternally 3 and 5 and 7 years old. Still working the shift that never ends, in a space the building made room for because her need to care was stronger than the concrete and steel that said those floors didn't exist. Some jobs don't finish just because your employment ends. Some responsibilities continue beyond diagnosis and death. Folded neatly and waiting for delivery to rooms no one else can find.